Well, it's 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. All right, a little bit past 10 o'clock, but close. And I'm on my second cup of coffee. I'm using this mug that my boys got me for Christmas. They'd gone to Hobby Lobby looking for something else, and they saw this mug, and they were like, "Mama, we've got to buy this for Papa. He loves old trucks." It's true. They have been in the car lots of times when I've been driving along and suddenly I slow way down and I'm looking off into someone's yard or field or driveway, and I'm saying, "Look at that," and there'll be something from half a century ago, either an old International pickup or a Jeep pickup or, one of the other old pickups. One of my favorites that I'm hoping one day I can have one. I don't know what I'm going to do with it other than drive around to Bible studies with it or something. I don't know, because it's an old 65 Chevy stepside. That's what I want. 3 on the tree. My coffee's spilling a little bit. It's my second cup of coffee, as I said. So today I'm thinking about a lot of things. We live in shifting, changing times, and I get personally in my emails and in my ads and other places that constantly happen to me, I'm getting people talking about survival. And so I just wanted to think a little bit about it. And it may not be what you think. Last night I was at Trail Life, and one of the young men there was doing, the Hawks, the patrol that I'm currently leading. The Hawk Patrol we're talking about hobbies right now. And so one of the young men brought a rock collection that he has. And so he brought a whole collection, some pretty awesome crystals and other things. And so he was sharing about the rocks, and other people were sharing. But at the end, he gave me this rock to bring home. And I don't even know what kind of rock it is. I don't know if I can focus on it any better if I come up closer here. The lighting isn't quite right there. Okay. I have to zoom in on it. Here we go. I can do this. There. Good lighting and good focus. So you can see that this rock has a lot of layers, but it has these little crystals on it that make me think of iron pyrite as well. And so I'm not quite sure what it is, but this was a rock that was given to me last night by a hawk at Trail Life. So I am grateful for that relationship with the young guys that I get to work with. And I realized I was very close to my microphone while I was showing you the rock. So hopefully that wasn't too loud. But, now the focus is still off. Let's see if I can fix that. That's worse. Okay. Maybe. All right, so this was my rock from last night. It reminded me of so much of my own childhood. There was a time when I was older than the young man who gave me the rock. I was 11 or 12, and my friends Eli and Marion and I had headed out to. This was when we lived in northwest Montana, and we had gone on an adventure up to Mount Robinson. And when we had a ride up that in a vehicle, but we'd taken our bikes because we were going to ride down the mountain back home. And so I remember, we rode quite a while, and it was exhilarating because, you were just coasting the whole way, and you just were coming down this, and we'd already had our hike. The specifics of the story were that, I keep thinking I'm buzzed on my focus there, and I might still be, so sorry. But the specifics of the story were that our families had gone on a hike earlier in the week or the previous week, and one of us had left a backpack up somewhere at the base of Mount Robinson. And so the 3 of us were being sent back up to retrieve the backpack. And it was just a family backpack. Snacks and whatever was in it is what we weren't sure if we would even find it because of animals and stuff. And so the three of us went up, unloaded our bikes at the bottom of the trailhead. I don't know if we hit them in the bushes or what we did, but we put our bikes there, and then we hiked up and we went backwards from what we'd usually do. We didn't even go up to see the lake. We just went straight up backwards looking for the backpack. And so we found the backpack. We climbed the pinnacle. That was all part of our day's adventure. So we went up the face, scaled. We had a great time. And then it was time to come home, and so we get on our bikes and we're going down the trail, riding down, and we've probably gone 5 miles. I don't know. We'd gone a ways when we came up alongside a clear cut, and we saw these rock outcroppings way off over there in the distance, and we thought that would be fun to go explore. So we parked our bikes, we hiked over there, and I don't know when we ate lunch or anything. I just remember the things we did. I don't remember the time frame necessarily. But what happened next, and my remembrance of this, is that the mountain sun was, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon at this stage. And so the sun was had been about as warm as it was going to be, and was beginning to on its way down, but it was 3 o'clock-ish. We were up there on these rock outcroppings, just exploring, and suddenly one of us finds a little cube that glitters like gold. And we got so excited, and we started looking all through this rock formation. There were these little cubes, the rectangular cubes, that just were like these crystals of something. And we were looking at them, and I might have told you all this story before, so I'm going to tell you quite a few stories today, and some of them you might have already heard, so sorry if you've already heard my stories. I'm stringing them together for a reason. But we're looking at these little crystals, and they really do glitter, and they really are shiny, and they really look golden, and surely they're worth something. And so we keep digging them out until each of us has quite a handful that we're taking home with us, and so we finally look at the sun and we've got to go. We probably stayed there an hour and a half. So we tie up our crystals of gold, and one of us had brought up, I'm thinking it was one of the Ish boys, had brought up the possibility that this could be iron pyrite, known as fool's gold. And we all looked at it and we're like, it could be, but it's really cool. So we kept digging it out. And so we took home, each of us had a whole handful of this, and we went home. And as we got closer to home, because when we first found it, we thought it would be really cool to talk about it. And so, we were thinking at church the next day or at school on Monday, we'd talk about this. Well, we decided against it. We went and looked it up first. And so at church on Sunday, I don't know if they brought their iron pyrite with them. I know I had a few of my best pieces in my pocket, but I hadn't shown it to anyone. And I was waiting. And then Marion or Eli, I forget which, were standing there Sunday morning before church. And I believe church was at Ora Miller's house up on the hill there. And one of them comes over and says, "We looked it up. It's iron pyrite." And so I knew we had fool's gold, so we didn't talk about it. But it was sure beautiful, and we had it, and it was fun. So when the young man at Trail Life gave me this rock, I was reminded of all the times I've spent digging up rocks and having fun collecting rocks. Rocks are awesome. And then, because I was thinking about Marion and Eli, it reminded me, and school, one day at school, this was up in the West Kootenai there in Montana, this is the Amish school, and so we had a woodworking shop that was just next door to the school there. And I believe both the school and the woodworking shop are actually still there, different ownership for the woodworking shop. But there had been someone that had come into the community, an older gentleman by the name of Will, and he looked like he was from a different century. And so Will would do some blacksmithing, and he had made it possible for, he invited the whole school to come over and see how to do blacksmithing. And so we came over there, and we all gathered around, and he was the forge, and he let different ones of us operate his. He had both the little hand pump bellows, and he had a one of the cranking forge bellows things, so he would put air up underneath. And so he's showing us things with metal. He's making these different shapes and stuff, and he's talking about all kinds of stuff from 100+ years ago. And you can tell that he loves certain things about the past, that he loves certain things from, like, say, the Civil War era or that time frame, maybe even before. And so as he's talking about that, like, it's inspirational for us as kids. Like, he lets each of us, play a little bit on the anvil and warm stuff up. He had several anvils out, and so we took some turns, and we got to see what it's like pounding on hot metal and all of that. So that was fun. But at the end of it, he was explaining how he could show us how we could start our fire without matches. And so he showed it to us, and he had a striker, and he had some rock, and he had a little bit of char cloth and some other things, and he was showing us all the different ways that people catch the sparks and stuff. And it was so inspirational. I'd read about it, thought about it, and so Mary and Eli and I, we got to talking about it. I remember going home, and I went out to my dad's toolbox. So my dad he had his Snap-on toolbox out in the in the shop where he worked on bikes and small engines, and he had all of these tools in there. And I remember going through each drawer, and what I was looking for a file, because Will had said that if we would bring him a file, he said an old file, a used file. If we brought him an old file, he could turn it into a striker that we could use to be a sparker to start fires with. And so I remember getting this, and it was not a used file. I mean, maybe it was used a little bit, but it was a new file. But it was the only one I could find. And so I went in and I said, Dad, I need this file. And, at the time, and so he let me take it. He let me take the file. And so I took this file, and I remember it was another Saturday, and some of us boys all were gathering over there. And he let each of us pretty much like work on it ourselves. He wanted us to heat it, temper it. We got it all the way, or untemper it basically, remove the temper from the metal, and then curve it and stuff. And so he helped us do that, and then he showed us how we could work with it. And I don't know if the camera can actually pick up any sparks that I can make. I don't know. I can't make the sparks and look at you at the same time. So there's some sparks that I'm seeing. Oh, yep, you're seeing them. Okay. So we learned how to throw sparks with different kinds of rocks. I had some agate. I had some quartz. Where did my quartz go? Yeah. But I had different kinds of rock that we would use, and we had different kinds of flint that we would use, and some of them were better at it than others, and we would work. Well, at first we played and played and played with these, and then there came a time when Mary and Eli and I decided to go on a camping trip, and we took these camping trip. We took all of this along, and we had a conversation about it. Now, we would always make these plans, and our plans were adventurous, and our plans came with a contingency. We had to talk with our moms, and we were 12 years old, and so our moms were absolutely awesome. Irene Esch, my mom, Rebecca Graber, awesome moms for boys. They let us go and adventure. It was absolutely awesome. In fact, they let us do. There's too many stories bombarding my head right now as I'm thinking about those days. So, like, for instance, the time we went up and got the Fool's Gold, I just remembered this. We were talking about it at school, and Joas Miller heard us talking about it and was like, what are you guys going to do? And we said, we're going to go and we're going to climb the rock face of the pinnacle. And he knew the pinnacle, and he knew the whole that area. And, we were all, at the time, I think 11 and 12-ish, 10, 11, 12, that age. And I'm not sure where Joas fits in. I'm trying to remember if he's a year older than me, I think. Anyway, I can't remember. So Joas says, if you climb the pinnacle, I'll give you $100. And we said, all right, we'll climb the pinnacle and we'll see your $100. So a week later at church, we're saying, hey, we climbed the pinnacle. We never saw the $100. So that just showed up there. But I'm not wanting for it either. We loved the adventure, and we didn't do it for money. We were doing it for fun, and it was awesome. So now we're talking about the fact that we can start fires without matches. And so we end up wanting to go on a camping trip. And so we plan the camping trip. We say who's bringing what. We're each bringing our different amounts of, our own sleeping bags and stuff, but then we're bringing different food, and each one of us has a backpack, and we're basically just going about 1.5 miles behind our house to Young Creek, and then we're going up Young Creek, and we're thinking we'd like to go about 2 miles up Young Creek is what we're thinking. And so we do our little hike back to Young Creek, then we go up Young Creek, and now we choose our camping spot. We've got Young Creek running nearby, making the beautiful sound of a creek. We are right in the middle of mountain lion territory, and we know it. We've heard reports. I think I'm trying to remember who it was, Howard Choi or Howard Kaufman. One of them had seen the mountain lions back there. Maybe both of them. Different people had given the reports of a mountain lion, even a mountain lion with cubs back, with kittens back up there. And we were hoping to be able to see the mountain lion and the baby mountain lion, but we were also kind of fearful because mountain lions are scary. If you've ever seen one in the wild, they're huge cats. The way they move, everything about it, it just is awesome, and it strikes fear in your heart a little bit. You're like, whew, I'm glad it's not hunting me, right? So we did not see the mountain lion that weekend. We do not know whether or not the mountain lion saw us. Just the nature of how that works. So we're up camping, and we decided to build our fire with our strikers and not use matches. And so we show up there. We collect all the necessary tinder and the kindling and everything. We get it all ready. We build our fire. And it took us probably 5 minutes of building the fire correctly and then striking the sparks in and then catching everything on fire. And we had our fire going. We all sit there. We kind of sit back on our heels. We're satisfied that we started this fire. And I remember at that point feeling very relieved, and then feeling compelled to be honest, and looking over at Marion and Eli, and I said, I'm really glad that worked, but I did bring matches. And we had told each other we wouldn't even bring matches as a backup. And then they laughed and said, we did too. And so we thought, we were sure, we were positive we could start a fire with our new method, but we still brought our matches along. And then we got there, and we did start a fire with our new method. But we had our matches along. And so I always think of that. There's something about human nature in there. We really, really, really like the safety. And so, being out there with our fire striker and all of that, it made us feel like we were maybe 100 years earlier than what we were. We were in the woods. We were camping. We could start a fire without matches. It was awesome. And we would talk about a lot of these kind of things and survival and so forth. And I loved it. It was very boy, and it just was awesome. And looking back now, there are memories from that time period that I, for instance, Will, the guy that helped us make this, he got a little farm across the valley. So I would be biking up and down from school. And I remember coming home from school late in the spring, and Will is over there plowing his land, trying to get it ready for planting. So he's got a team of horses out there. He loves the idea of horses. He loves that time frame. He wants to be there. In some, like he was one of those guys that would have rather lived in a different time frame. But here's what I remember. I remember riding my bike up the side of the hill there on West Kootenai, past the site where the old school had burnt down, suddenly hearing some yelling and maybe swearing, I'm not sure. But I heard some yelling coming from the other side of the valley, and I look across, and there's Will, and his horses are running across the field, and he's chasing after them. He had so much trouble with those horses. He had so many runaways. There were so many, like all of us in the valley sooner or later saw him have a runaway with his horses, either in the field or with his wagon or a buggy or whatever he was using. And in retrospect, I look back and I see a man who had so much knowledge and so much skill in so many areas, but he didn't know horses. He didn't understand how to work with horses. And so even though he could do a lot with blacksmithing and other stuff, he didn't understand horses. And part of what he also didn't understand, I think he had quite a temper. And so that would really get him in trouble. And so there was in looking at him, it was apparent to me that it's a good thing he didn't live 150 years ago, because by the time he gets that field plowed and planted and everything in there, he'll probably, he might miss the harvest because he doesn't know what he's doing. And so as much as he loves it and wants to do it, it's not going easy for him. And so that was a bit of a lesson. And later on, I've met a lot of friends who have just been totally enamored with the Civil War era. I had one gentleman who I really respect, and yet he would love to be in the Civil War era. I get it. But I know he had some medical conditions and things that happened to him that had he lived in the Civil War era, he would have been dead several times over already. And now, the other day, about a couple weeks ago, we were at our Living History Day meeting, and the medicine table, the medicine booth, they were doing their talk, the doctor thing. And so they're talking about the different kinds of medicine that they can do in 1776. And the thing that I just can't get out of my mind, I see it right there on the table right in the front. There's this big old, looks like a hacksaw, but this big old bone saw. And it's part of the surgical the surgical weapons, the surgical tools, is because depending what happens to you, they're just going to hack your leg off or your arm or whatever, and you amputate and hope that the wound heals, because you're pretty sure you can't heal the what had happened to the other person, so or to your leg. And so I'm thinking the medical situation then versus now, and there is something. I used to read books about people like Daniel Boone and others, and I'd just go out in the woods and try so hard. I wanted to be that survival guy. And so I learned a lot of useful skills about camping, about living in the woods, about harvesting food that's naturally growing all around us all the time in the woods. And that's awesome. But I think of how much it takes to survive in history, and how there's something, you need something. We look back. Stacy has been reading Little House on the Prairie, all the Little House books and the Laura Ingalls books to the boys, and they've been listening to it. And recently, while we had our cold snap and all the winter weather, she was actually reading through the long winter. And so you as I'm listening to bits and pieces of it, my mom read the books to us. I've read the books several times, but there was such tenacity in those pioneers. They had such a desire to explore new places and survive, right? And so there's something admirable in that. But our boys, some time ago, discovered that, I forget what was happening, but Laura risked her life. And so they're all on the edge of their seats. And so one of them says, well, I'm glad she didn't die. And the other one's like, yeah, because then she would only have written the books up until now. And Mom was like, no. If she would have died, we wouldn't hear any of these stories. And they're like, no, she could have written the books up until she died. And so Stacy had to explain, no. She lived for quite a while past the happenings in the books before she wrote any of them down. If she would have died, she would have, And so later, they're now reading through another story, and one more time there's stuff happening, and they get done, and Laura survives again, and Hudson is like, whew, I'm so glad she didn't die. And Eric says, yeah, because if she would have died even once, she couldn't have written the books. It's true. If she would have died even once, she could not have written those books. So there's something that it takes. We read the survivors of the history. There were a lot of people who didn't survive history, and their stories would have been, if we would only read the non-survival people's story, how they died, if we would only have a record of all the deaths of people who tried great things and failed, it would be quite discouraging for us. We wouldn't try it. But because we read the stories of people who actually survive and live to tell about it, that's why we want to do it. We think that would be awesome. So, something about history, to the survival thing, it requires a certain zest for living and something of an attitude, something that we need to have in us. And so I was thinking a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now. No, it was this year already. I was down visiting my brother, and so the Graber boys were all playing together, and there's Robert and Roy. Robert's about Eric's age, more or less, and Roy is about Hudson's age. Well, as they're interacting, like Peter is kind of the older of the whole bunch, and so he's not always totally engaging in what they're playing, but he is sometimes. He's kind of watching, and then he's involved. But Robert and Eric really got involved, and somehow there was an enmity that was, a fun, brotherly, cousinly enmity. They were having all their tussling and all their wars and their pillow fights and everything. It somehow turned into where it was Roy against Robert, Eric, and Hudson. And so I'm watching from Jonathan and I are sitting in the office space, and we're looking out into the living room, and I'm seeing all of these pillows constantly being tossed on top of Roy, and he's just being completely covered. And so I'm finally like, Jonathan, you might just make sure that he's still having fun, because I mean, he was fighting. He was like so much energy, and he was getting up and throwing those pillows back, and then being totally overwhelmed by pillows. And so I just want to make sure that he was actually having fun. So Jonathan steps out and says, "Hey, Roy, how's it going?" And Roy, I'm winning. And that was his narrative the whole time. He was winning. So I'm watching and I'm like, he's being beat up, but he was winning. And I think there's something to that about our life. We can, the world might look at us and say, wow, they're getting so beat up. But if we have this winning attitude, this concept of I'm still in the battle and I'm winning, we enjoy things a lot more. And so there's something, in order to have that winning attitude, though, that requires something. And so I think about all of the things. When we talk about survival, there's a lot more to survival than just not dying. We have to actually thrive. We have to actually be, in this past year, there's been a lot of focus in our time of how to not get a certain virus. And so the question wasn't asked, how do we keep people perfectly healthy? The question has been asked multiple ways. How do we keep from getting that particular virus? And so while there are times when a doctor has to answer that question, how do I keep from getting a particular sickness or disease? There is a better question that doctors and all of us would do well to be asking. How do we keep our whole body healthy? Not just our body, not just our physically, but how do we all, as a whole being, how do we stay healthy and strong? That's a better question, because if we're healthy and strong all the way around, then we can avoid the worst consequences of the various viruses that were going to ravage our society as the years go by, because viruses are with us for a long time. But the whole body needs to be healthy, right? And so if I'm thinking about Roy and wanting to be winning, then I need to be healthy on several levels. I need to be healthy physically. I need to have a healthy sense of worth. Emotionally, I need to be healthy. I need to be loved. I need to have an awareness of what's going on around me. I need to have purpose and direction. I need to be able to think clearly. I need to be able to trust that when I am thinking, that I am thinking clearly. I need to not doubt myself all the time. So these are all big questions. And you will always find, either in medicine, in philosophy, or in church, religion, in politics, all areas of life, you will find some people who their only interest is to give you enough information to make you dependent on them. That's not healthy. What you're looking for a pastor, a politician, a doctor who says, here's the information. I want you to look at this and think about this. I want you to use everything at your disposal, and I want you to make a good decision. Because if you start finding a pastor, a politician, or a doctor, or any leader of any kind who says, you're just not able to think these things through, but I've thought them through for you, therefore listen to my words and do as I say, those are so many red flags. If that was the approach the pioneers would have taken, they would never have taken on anything new or dangerous. If that was the approach that our Irene Esch and my mom would have taken, they would never have let us go out and experience life for ourselves. I'm sure they prayed for us. They knew where we were going. They knew what we were doing. They knew we were boys. But they also knew what they had taught us, and they knew what we were capable of, and they knew how we could work together. And so they trusted God and released us to go and live. And there's a big deal there. And so if you're in a position of authority, you need, for whoever's underneath you, whether you're a parent, whether you're a employer and you have people working underneath you, whether you're in politics and you have some kind of leadership position, whether you're in any kind of ministry leadership, if you're a pastor, any of these things, what you really want to do is equip your people to have that winning attitude, to have that idea that they are capable of hearing from God, of reading the scenarios around them, and making a good decision. And so, for instance, just touching on one of them before I go here, if you have that sense of worth, of being loved, I look at my boys and I look at my brother's sons and a lot of families around me, and I see these little children who are absolutely bold and fearless because they are so loved. They know who they are. They know that they're loved by us, and that takes care of a whole bunch of their self-worth and their healthy whole life health, and they're just ready to go do things. But what if you're missing that piece? Because, sooner or later, you will come to doubt whether you have any self-worth, whether you are loved. Any of that will come up. And for myself, when I wasn't sure that I could trust people to tell me that, I remember going to scripture and prayer, and God himself affirmed that he was the one who called me to himself, that he redeemed me, and because of his love placed on me, that was the source of my self-worth. Not because I had some great talent or amazing ability, but because God himself loved me. And this is the story of the ages, is God loves us. And so for survival, we want more than survival. We want a whole person, exciting, can-do attitude of, I can do this. Why? Because I'm loved by God. So that's my message for today, my story, as I'm talking about survival. And thank you guys I see some of your comments here now. Thanks you guys for joining. I'm really grateful. I just wanted to share a few of these stories and make you think of some of the stories of times when you have done things you didn't think you could do. Because that day that we were climbing the pinnacle that I told you about, the three of us boys, we scared ourselves so bad that, we were we were 11 and 12 at the time. And so I remember by the time we got up to the top of this one ledge, it had been too high for us, and we had to two of us had to boost one up, and then one had to reach down, and we boosted, and by the time we got the last person up and over, and we were at such a height that it was a little bit dizzying for us looking back down the rock face. As we landed on that little ledge, and we're all just resting, getting ready for the next ascent, we were sitting there, and I distinctly remember my own hand just shaking and looking at the others, and we're all just sitting there shaking for a little bit, and then we recover, and then we go on. We did things that we had never done before, that we didn't know whether we could do. We scared ourselves, but it was awesome. And it was part of building up in us the fact that we were men, and that was only part of it. There is so many parts. There are so many parts to each of us as individual beings, but the main part that I'm getting after is that you, in right relationship with God, can survive and more than survive. And you want to take care of as many of these areas in your life as you can. You want to be healthy in all areas, and then you can more than survive. And the time right now are ripe for adventure. It's ready. The world is at a place you can go study history. We have so many opportunities for big adventure right now. There's a lot of need in the world. So I've gone past my 30 minutes that I desire to talk for my coffee talks. I wanted to end at 30 minutes, and I keep going over. So go find your place in the Creator, find your place in creation, and don't be worried about one thing, but look at the whole of your life and say, where am I? Am I wholly healthy? And if you can find health in each of these areas, I think you will be able to go and adventure, and you can be like Roy, whereas the world looks at you saying, I don't understand. Stuff is just piling on top of him, but every time they come back up and they're still swinging, and there's a huge grin on their face, and they're breathing heavily, and they're living life to the fullest, and when their father asks them, how's it going? They're like, I'm winning! Let's live like that. So, blessings. I'll talk to you next week. Love you guys.